So, hello everyone, I hope you're all doing good. In this video, I'm going to share with you how I taught communication skill, expressing complaint. So, let's get started. So, as I lead in and in order to activate students' background schemata, I suggested some situations in order to elicit the word complaint or the verb to complain. So I asked them what would they do in the following situations. The first situation was that you got 18 out of 20 in your final exam, but in Masar you found that you got only 10 out of 20. What would you do? Here are some answers that I got. Some students say that they would tell the teacher. Others said that they would contact the administration. Fine. And then I moved to the other situation, and it was like this. In a cafe, you ordered pizza, but the waiter or the waitress served you pasta. What would you do? So the answers I got were, I would eat it. I love pasta, said one of my students. Other students said that you would call the waiter or the waitress to change the dish. So in the following stage, so for this stage, I devoted 5 minutes, okay, for discussion. Afterwards, I moved to the stage where I shared the objective with my students. So in order to share the objective indirectly, I asked students, what do we call the act of telling about an unpleasant situation or action, something that we don't like and we find okay and unacceptable. So one of my students answered shakwa, and of course I repeated her answer into English. I said, yes, complaint, or to make a complaint. With other students, this stage took me more than 2 minutes, okay, because they couldn't understand the action of telling about something that you don't like or you don't accept, even in Arabic. So it took more than 2 minutes. Then I told my students that by the end of the session, they would be able to make complaints and also respond to complaints in English. So I distributed the worksheet, okay, in the encounter stage and asked my students to answer these questions. Of course, the method I follow is that I always ask my student, what do you see, or what is this? And they always answer by saying a dialogue, a text, a paragraph, or pictures, depending on what I use for the stage, the encounter stage. So students were asked to answer these questions from reading the dialogue. So I asked them, what is this? They said this is a dialogue between who and who, between a dentist and a patient. And what do you see underneath? I usually put the questions under the dialogue or the text. And they say questions. So what are you going to do? We are going to answer the questions from the text. How much time do you have? 2 minutes. Of course, I devoted 5 minutes to the whole activity. 2 minutes for students to work out to answer the questions, and the other 3 minutes were devoted to the whole class correction. So the dialogue is between a dentist and the patient. So the patient was a little bit unsatisfied with the treatment or the medications that the dentist prescribed them, and he complained about that. So the doctor didn't accept his didn't accept his complaint. He rejected it, and he explained why. Then the patient again complained about the assistant, and this time the dentist accepted the complaint and explained. Okay, he provided the clarification. So after answering these questions, students understood the dialogue. We moved to the clarifying stage. I devoted 5 minutes to this stage, and I asked my students to underline all the expressions of making complaint and responding to complaint, then classify them in the table, in the following table. So in the dialogue we have two, or let's say two expressions of making complaint, a complaint made by the patient, and one expression of accepting a complaint made by the doctor, and one expression of rejecting a complaint made by the dentist again. Of course, 2 minutes were devoted to, or were given to students to underline the expressions. The other 3 minutes were devoted to correcting the activity. In the following, this is an intermediate stage actually between clarifying and remembering. Actually, this activity serves for enriching students' knowledge and provide them with a variety of expressions. So I asked them to classify these expressions of making and responding to a complaint into the previous chart, into the previous table. And for the sake of saving time, I always ask them to write only the number of the expression in the appropriate column. Again, this activity has to be done in 2 minutes and be corrected in 3 minutes. In the remembering stage, I gave my students some situations and asked them some complaints actually, and they were required to match them with their appropriate responses. I provide them with an example, and they got 2 minutes to work out the activity, and the 3 other minutes were given to correcting the activity. In the following stage, which was internalizing stage, I asked my students, my students actually were given some situations or some complaints, and they were asked to give or to respond appropriately to these complaints. Okay, the exercise seemed to be short, but I devote to it 5 minutes. 2 minutes were devoted to working out the exercise, and the other 3 minutes were given to the whole class correction. I actually devote more than 5 minutes to it because my students were a little bit more engaged, and they all participated. So I'd love to listen to all their answers. In the following activity, in the same stage, internalizing stage, I asked my students to make complaints in the following situations. So the first situation has to do, it is actually related to their situations. Most classes in our high schools are crowded, so it was easy for them to complain in this situation. The next one was actually about the new table, because my students had they had one timetable, then it had been changed into a new exhausting new table, and they had to protest and complain to the administration, but in vain. So it was easy for them to complain about this one. You can omit it and you can modify it, and you can, change the situations into more appropriate ones. Okay. I devote 5 minutes also to this activity. In the fluency stage, I asked my students to work in pairs or groups to write dialogues in which they make complaints and respond to complaints. Actually, I devote 15 minutes to this activity. 10 minutes were given to students to write the dialogue, and in the following session, we started our session with the performance of the dialogues. Let me tell you that their performance was just outstanding. It was really amazing and fabulous. It was excellent. So this is how I taught expressing complaint following the Ecrif framework, which was, in this framework, most work is done by students, and the teacher is there just to facilitate things. Okay. But in prior, I had to work harder on the worksheet, and in choosing the situations and the activities. It seems a little bit long, but it works with high achievers, and I hope you enjoy teaching this lesson. Thank you so much.